Hello and welcome to a video about some cars. Now at the moment, I don't know if it's just me, but South Africa feels like a Woolworths. Very cold and very expensive. And so I found two cracking little budget cars for you to consider. One from Suzuki, one from Ford. Right, let's kick it off with the new Suzuki Swift, and it really is an all-new car, except for the little motor which they've carried over from the previous generation. Now, something Suzukis are famous for is their fuel consumption, but the downside is that you have a car with very little torque, only 113 Newton meters compared to 150 in the Ford. Now those numbers don't mean particularly much, but when your Suzuki is fully loaded, you're going to have to row through the gears a bit to get up steeper hills. And that's not too bad a thing to live with because the car is very light. So if you're on your own, nipping around traffic is actually fine. And the upside, of course, that fuel economy. I'm averaging 6 liters to the 100 in here without even trying. So you'll get to the 5s very, very easily. Another highlight of the Suzuki is its ride quality. It handles poor road surfaces very well. And I wonder if that's because this is pretty much the best-selling car in India. So they've had a lot of time and practice to perfect the car riding over not such perfect roads. Now I've got the manual here, which is probably the one to go for, and that's because the auto version of the Swift is actually what's called an AMT, which is a robotized manual. While the Suzuki AMT is probably the best on the market, it still is not a great driving experience. It changes gear for you, it clutches for you, and it's just a bit of a faff, to be honest. So don't bother with that auto, stick to the manual, and it's also 15,000 Rand cheaper, which is great. Now when you walk into a Suzuki showroom, the important thing you need to know for this generation is that there are no longer two very different Swifts to choose from. In the previous gen, you used to be able to choose from the Japanese built Swift and the Indian built Swift. The Japanese one had a lot more features, particularly safety features, over the Indian car, and it also had a different engine. So there's only the Indian one to choose from now with this little engine, and a big difference between the two is the safety features. For instance, the Japanese car had 6 or 7 airbags, whereas this one has 2. You also don't get electronic stability control in this car, but you do get brake assist and EBD, 2 features which you don't get in the Figo. So keep that in mind. But I think it's a decent move from Suzuki South Africa not to bring the Japanese one in anymore, because they've really managed to get the pricing right on this car. You can get into a new Swift for just under 160,000 Rand, and the one I'm driving today is 180, and that is pretty good value at the moment at this end of the market. Into the Figo we go, and the first thing you'll notice in this particular car is that I don't have to change gears. So unfortunately we couldn't get a manual Figo for this test, so I can't really compare the Figo directly to the Swift in this comparison. However, what I'd like to do quickly, if you don't mind, is compare the Figo to the Fiesta, which I drove recently. And for some reason, I actually preferred driving the Figo to the Fiesta. I know that sounds really strange, but a lot of it is down to the gearbox. It just feels like this is better sorted than it is in the Fiesta. And I like the engine in this Figo as well. It's a bit bigger in terms of displacement than the Swift we have here today. This is a 1.5 liter, but it has one less cylinder, so it's a 3-cylinder. And what that means is it has a lot more power and torque than the Swift, and it just makes it a lot easier to drive, especially if you're climbing up hills a lot, or if you're fully loaded. You're definitely going to appreciate the extra torque in this Figo. Like the Swift, it also offers a really good ride quality. Cars in the segment really have come a long way. It's nice and quiet in the cabin. I would say slightly quieter than the Swift as well. But the thing is, if you want this auto, and I suppose you do, then you're looking at a 30k price difference between this and the Swift that we have here today. If you go for a manual Ford, then you're looking at a 15k price difference. So the Figo is the more expensive car, and unfortunately it has less spec as standard than the Swift does. So good little engine this in the Ford. I think you're going to appreciate it as well when you're trying to overtake a truck somewhere out on the freeway. But the penalty is that the Ford is quite a bit thirstier than the Swift. We're averaging 7.8 here in the Ford, which means it's about 25% thirstier than the Swift. So you've got to take that into account these days, and in a budget car like this, that could really sway your decision. Overall though, I must admit, I do like this little Figo. I think it's a great car to live with. It also offers a longer service plan and warranty than the Suzuki, but according to our research, Suzuki does offer better service and is slightly more reliable as a brand than Ford is. So that's something to weigh up, but you will be looked after a little bit more when it comes to the Ford. 4-year 120,000 kilometer warranty compared to 3-year 100,000 in the Swift, and also the service plan is twice as long at 60,000 Ks versus 30,000 in the Swift. Now it's very possible that right now you're a young and adventurous person and you might be looking for a fun car to drive at this end of the market. And in that case, I think the Swift's actually the one to have. It's a lot lighter than the Figo, over 200 kgs lighter as well. So even though it has less power and torque, it's actually really fun to drive. Right, welcome to the scene where I sit in the cars and point at things. Now, one of the biggest differences between the Swift and the Figo is steering wheel controls. You get radio and Bluetooth controls in the Suzuki. I think you're going to miss that in the Ford. There are some nice design elements in here which really lift the cabin. I like what they've done with the dials. And overall, the look and feel and quality of the plastics in the Swift is just a little bit better. As I mentioned, Bluetooth is standard, but it requires a degree in computer science to set it up. I still haven't figured it out. You do get a CD player and aux jack in the Swift, which you don't get in the Figo. Aircon is manual, and unfortunately there's no option for auto, and there's no touchscreen option in here either. I would say though that the seats in the Swift, very good, very comfy and very supportive. This is the interior of the Ford Figo, and immediately it feels a little down market in here compared to the Swift. There's nothing going on the steering wheel. These plastics aren't very nice. The seats aren't nearly as nice as the ones in the Swift. The dials are a little bit boring. The gear knob feels quite old-fashioned, but there are some nice touches. I like what Ford have tried to do with this setup. So it allows you to clip a phone in there, and there's a USB port behind there so that you can charge your phone while you're driving. Really cool, because there's no touchscreen available, so this allows you to use your phone for nav and that sort of thing. But all the phones that I know or have used in the last few years, the on button is on the side of the phone, which is a bit of an issue. Now for the all-important boot test using a South African standard of measurement known as the cooler box. Right, first the Ford, and a little bit tight getting in there, but if you drop the handle, there we go, you can see that it fits decent height as well, and I would say it's about 3 cooler boxes wide. The seats also fold down 60-40, which is good. That's not gone well. Over to the Suzuki, and oh, you see now that just goes in much easier. Look at that. Look how much extra depth there is as well. Good height, and I would say it's also about 3 cooler boxes wide. So definitely a win for the Suzuki. Now I've tested the back seats for you. It's very boring showing that on camera, so you just have to take my word for it. Both of them are almost identical in the back seats. Maybe the Figo just offers a little bit more knee room. So in this budget car battle, we have to pick a winner. When it comes to the Ford, I think you really will enjoy the extra power and torque of the engine. In most driving situations, it's just going to be a bit of an easier car to drive. However, the penalty is fuel consumption, and in that area, the Suzuki does really well. And of course, for us South Africans, that is a big deal right now. When it comes to looks, I prefer the Ford. The Suzuki doesn't do much for me at all. Could just be my taste. But what they have done with the new design is really address the Achilles heel of the Swift, and that was a tiny boot. So they've really sorted that out. It's quite interesting with these two cars. Ford seems to be trying to take the Figo up market, while Suzuki seems to be trying to take the Swift down market. And in that way, I think the Swift represents better value. It's cheaper by about 15 grand and has more spec as standard. So right now, for our money, as things stand, we think the Swift is the better buy.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, maybe give it a like, and definitely subscribe to be the first to see our videos as they drop. Yeah, definitely do that.